So without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker for today. I'm very happy to have Dean Roberts with us, and she is going to talk to us about effective employee motivation strategies. So I'll turn things over to her.
Thank you, Jana, and hello, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully this goes okay. Okay, is everyone seeing a full screen of my little presentation?
Yes.
How are we doing, Jana? Good. Okay,
yes.
Great. I'm delighted to be a part of our series. I hope you've been able to enjoy some of the webinars in the past. And as Jana mentioned, they're all available on YouTube. So they're there for anytime or anyone who would like to watch them. We're really happy to have that resource. So my topic today, and I'm really happy to be presenting this topic, and it's on top of mind for everyone, no matter where I go. Any conversation I have with anyone in business, I think this is like a key issue for them right now. In fact, I'm working with a local chamber of commerce on their strategic planning, and we put a survey together. And one of the questions was, what is the thing that is most challenging for your business today? And the top answer, bar none, was recruitment and retention of employees. Can't find them, can't keep them. What do I do? How do I move forward? So yeah, I think this is kind of top of mind. The topic was originally sort of billed as motivation, but there's a lot of elements that go into motivation. So what I'm going to do today is cover kind of three main areas. So talk about elements of motivation, elements that go into motivation, and there's some more current terminology that we'll talk about. Basically, we're going to talk about employee belonging. Engagement is kind of the hot word now instead of motivation, retention, and ultimately performance. Dig a little bit deeper into elements that really go into employee engagement. And then the last kind of piece is really the so what piece. So what does all this mean? And so what can I do to help attract and keep my top employees? I am a fan of conversation. Hopefully we can have a conversation throughout this webinar. Jana is manning the chat, and I should probably see if I can find that somewhere, or the Q&A. So please use the Q&A at any time. I hate to just monologue for 45 minutes here. So would love to have you pose questions or actually even offer suggestions, because this is just some of the ideas that I have and the literature has, but you might be doing something really interesting in your place. Also noting some of the participants, I think you have extensive experience in this area. I see some familiar names on the list, and I would love to hear from you as well. So I'm glad you're able to join us today. Jenna is asking, are we able to receive the PowerPoints for this webinar? And I believe we have it as part of YouTube. I'd be happy to share mine. If you just send me an email, I can give you my email address later, or we could put it in the Q&A, and I can just package it up and send it to you, not a problem. Any other questions before we get started? Okay, yeah, great. Okay, so. Hello, I want my thing move forward. Maybe I have too many things open here. All right, so again, as I mentioned, this is top of mind with everyone. We have a low unemployment rate, which is really interesting. According to Gartner, which is kind of a data analytics think tank, right now the voluntary turnover rate is creeping up to 20%, which is pretty high. If you look at total turnover together, it's over 50%. I think it's like 57%. But there are a lot of people that are really moving around, especially since the pandemic. And we're going to dig into that a little bit, right? We also have the silver tsunami. I love that little picture. Hopefully that's me someday soon. There's a lot of people that have chosen retirement because of the pandemic. So there are kind of a lot of factors that are going into why people are moving. Interestingly enough, I mentioned the great resignation to great retention. There's also now kind of a great reconsideration or regret. Like once people left, they realized the grass wasn't necessarily greener. So maybe in the future, we're going to see some of this revert back. So some interesting ideas there. This was done, so periodically, the Gallup Corporation looks at why people leave. They look at what managers think and what employees think. And this was most recently done in 2021. So this is fairly recent. So managers kind of think when they're polled that people leave because they're looking for a better job or they're not being paid enough. I want more work-life balance. I need to take care of my family. Basically, you know, they have better opportunities elsewhere, or another company may have stole them. However, if you look at what employees actually think, I'm not being valued by my organization or my manager. I don't feel like I fit in or belong here. Work-life balance is still pretty high up there. Potential for advancement is also up there. Inadequate compensation, interestingly enough, comes into about the middle. So it's not necessarily the thing that's top of mind, but there are a lot of other conditions that go into what makes people stay. And if you take a look at some of the differences, I always find this striking. And I've been teaching in this area for, almost about 20 years, and this really hasn't changed much. You know, the categories move around a little bit, but this has been fairly stable over time. So I'm just really struck by that, and I just think that's really interesting. We think we know as managers what people want, but that's not necessarily true. All right, so one of the top things that employees are looking for is, do I fit in or do I belong? And this is becoming more and more of an issue, and also of an area of research. And basically what that means is people feel like they're included on things, they're accepted as part of the team. And really, if you look at the research around that really, if people feel they belong, they really are much more committed to the organization. They're much more engaged in what's going on. They're less likely to leave. They're less likely to call off, and they're all around better performers. So it's becoming sort of a key indicator or a key driver of really great performance. Okay, so here's another kind of key word that's become a little bit more popular than the word motivation, and that's employee engagement. So most of the recent research is around employee engagement. And so what does that mean? Different people have a little bit of different definitions, but basically it means that people are there. When they're at work, they are in their job, they're occupying their jobs, they're physically, psychologically, and emotionally committed. They're enthusiastic about being there, they're willing to offer suggestions, and they're basically just much more committed to what they're doing. All right, this research started about 25 years ago by the Gallup organization, and they've been doing this now. They've got over 80,000 workers and managers. They've looked at 50 different industries, and the basic fundamental questions are, what brought you to your current job and what keeps you here? Which again, we all would like to know, right? How am I attracting people and what keeps me here? Interesting thing is people will sign on to a company. They'll sign on to a current job because of the nature of the benefit structure or the reputation of the company, or I've always wanted to work for, you know, fill in the blank, IU Northwest, or I've always wanted to work for one of the banks. But the interesting thing that keeps them there is basically the internal relationships between the manager and their colleagues. So it's kind of that human relations piece that keeps them there. And that kind of goes back to that survey that we saw a couple slides ago. It's more about the relationship and how much I'm valued and how much I belong. They've come up with kind of 12 key aspects that go into employee engagement. And what I'm going to do is unpack that a little bit for you and kind of walk you through step by step, tell you a little bit about the background, and then we'll talk about, so what does this really mean for me on my job, and what can I do to directly apply some of this information to my place of work. So here we go. All right, first off, as I mentioned earlier, the research shows and the literature, literature shows that basically if you have high engagement, you can actually, it's a direct correlation to productivity. higher customer loyalty, and actually even improved employee well-being. Indirectly or conversely related to lower turnover. So again, more engagement, less quitting, less turnover, more engagement, less theft, which is interesting. People feel less likely to just sort of appropriate things and take them home with them. And also fewer safety incidences. So we're much more in tune to doing a good job and making sure I'm doing it correctly and safely. All right, so here are the 12 elements that we're going to go through a little bit in a little more detail. So at the top, we have things like, I know what's expected of me, I have the right materials and opportunities to do what I can do. There's a piece about recognition, a piece that somebody cares about me and my supervisor cares about me, my opinions are valued, the nature of the company and the mission makes me feel important, and we're all committed to doing a good job. Also, we've actually used the survey at IUN, and people chuckle about that next one. I have a best friend at work. Well, I don't have a best friend, but again, it's a commitment to your colleagues, right? So it might not be a best friend, but I have people that I consider good colleagues and good friends at work. And then also I have opportunities to learn about where I'm at and where I can learn and grow. So if we unpack this a little bit, it kind of starts at the very bottom. So the basic needs, kind of the very bottom of those 12 are just, I have an understanding of what I need to do every day on my job. I know what's expected of me, right? So not only do I know what's expected of me, but I also have the right materials to do a good job. I have equipment that works. I'm not constantly looking for things. I'm not fighting to just get my job done because of all these organizational obstacles, right? I have the things I need to do a good job. So that's kind of the fundamental level. The next level has to do with me, right? So somebody is encouraging me to develop. Again, I'm having conversations with my supervisor, and my supervisor generally is concerned and caring towards me. And I also get recognized when I do good work, okay? And the last one there, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day is really kind of an indication of fit, right? I'm in a position where I'm allowed to really use my talents to the best of my ability and to the best best organizational benefit. Okay, the next one. So we went from individual to collective, right? So I get along with my colleagues, I have friends at work, and we are all committed to doing quality work. I think one of the things that's even in my past experiences and in many places, I'm not necessarily as committed to doing quality work if I see people around me that are not, right? So we really are all committed to doing the best work that we can do. And I'm much more inclined to do my best work when I see others doing their best work as well. The mission makes me feel my job is important. We're going to talk a little bit later when we talk about purpose. Particularly for the younger generation, they're wanting to have jobs that have meaning, that have purpose. They're connecting more to organizational mission, and does that mission actually do more than just make a lot of money, right? So the meaning of work is also taking on a little bit more, getting a little bit more attention these days, which I think is really interesting. And my opinions seem to count. So when I do offer suggestions or when I do have ideas, people actually value them and take them into consideration versus I'm offering ideas and no one even hears me, right? So I have voice and my voice seems to matter. And then finally, this is kind of the top, okay, and this is again about my further growth and development. I have conversations about my progress, where I want to go, what's the next step in my professional development journey. I've had the opportunity to interview tons of people over the course of my career. And this question comes up quite a bit more now than it did in the past. You know, what kind of professional development opportunities are there? So people are, again, kind of much more in tune to not just what am I doing today, but how am I going to grow in this job in the future? And for those of you with an organizational behavior or management background, you're going to see this sort of looks like a familiar pyramid from the past, right? So if any of you remember Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this loosely sort of kind of reminds me of that as well, is that you have to start at the bottom with basic needs and then worry about individual growth and development, as well as how you're getting along in your group. Make sense? All right, so that's kind of the theory part, right? So I'm an academic. I had to give you some of the academic theory behind what the literature is saying around employee engagement, belonging, and motivation. But really, the important part is like, so what does this mean for me, and what are we going to do with this going forward? And again, I'll kind of work through each level of the pyramid to talk about ideas. Would love to hear if you have any ideas or suggestions for what maybe your place is doing or what you'd like to do. There are also some pauses for reflection in here too. So if you want to take a minute, write some notes down, jot something in the chat, that's totally fine. All righty, so the first thing is, who are we hiring and how do I hire people, right? So and this is our plug. I'm going to go back to what Jana said about, getting in touch with our students. We have a pipeline here that you can tap into if you'd like to. But basically, how do you create a system whereby you're constantly aware of people that you can hire, right? So what kind of relationships do you have with some of the local employment agencies or higher education institutions, or even places like Work One and that kind of thing. Internships are a great way to have an interesting way to find out about a candidate before you actually take them on full time. It's also a great opportunity for students as well. Job shadowing is kind of like an internship, although they're not, individuals are not necessarily responsible for work, but they kind of get to know what's going on. And as well as, have you set up career ladders within your organization? Oh, excuse me a minute. Sorry about that. If any of you are in the business of interviewing people and selecting people, it's not just a matter of, do I want to hire you, but it's also selling the position to the potential employee as well. So not only will you be a good fit for us, but sometimes we have to do a job of selling why this person should come on with us, particularly now it's a very competitive environment. So sharing a little bit about why you work here, what's great about your workplace, is also a way that you can really engage people into thinking about coming on board with you. This next one is pretty crucial as well, realistic job preview. So do they really know what they're getting into, right? Sharing what the day-to-day looks like or might not look like, so that people have an idea of what they're really getting into. We're increasingly looking at hiring for talent and fit because skill sets changed over time, right? So we might not necessarily have all of the credentials that an employer needs, but perhaps I have a really great motivation or personality that will go well with the position that you're looking for. A willingness to learn, a willingness to be a great team player, kind of those things that we talk about when we talk about talent and fit. We could do a whole day on hidden bias, and that's again something that's becoming more and more into people's awareness, that we are generally making assumptions about people and we don't even know we're doing that. So trying to understand maybe some of the possible biases that we have related to certain individuals or certain credentials will help us overcome those once we know what they are. And the last group, and this could be reconnecting retirees or also reconnecting people who have previously left the organization and are now willing to come back. So particularly if they were good employees, taking back somebody who's retired or moved on is a great way to help really ramp that. They're much more easy to ramp up back into your organization. So don't overlook that either. All right, I think I've frozen again. Here we go. Okay, so once we have a person on board, what we'd like to do is really make them feel a part of the team. So making sure that they know exactly where everything is. Everyone knows that we have this new person. really explaining how that job fits with the mission and what their purpose will be. You know, talking about expectations and goals related to the position. And then, you know, what kind of tools and training are available. A lot of organizations are going to mentorships, so pairing them up. We do that here when we have a junior faculty that we hire. We actually pair them up with a senior mentor. So again, they could get a feel for, you know, how things really work here. And then again, periodically touching base to make sure that person, if they have any questions or if they have concerns about something, you're able to address them in a timely manner. All right, so that's kind of the first step around expectations and getting people in the door. If we talk about building our team and building a culture of collaboration and sharing, one of the things we need to do is think about our conversations and the information that we're sharing. And really transparency is becoming more and more paramount, right? So sharing everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And again, that again allows people to feel like they're part of something, right? When people don't know what's going on, they're much more likely to fill in the blanks with their own sort of reality. And assumptions start being made and productivity starts to wane. And not just sharing information, but again, kind of having that two-way conversation. So sharing information as well as asking for feedback and input, right? And we all know that, you know, the more people have a voice in decisions, they're more likely to engage with those decisions and carry them forth. And then just asking, you know, how people are doing, right? So it's kind of an easy thing to do, particularly when things are not going well. Particularly, you know, we just came out of a really difficult period. So finding out where people are at is really crucial. It was really crucial for helping them feel like somebody really cares about me and what's going on. Okay, empowerment is kind of another piece of teamwork that we can talk about. And again, the more that you can empower people to do their work, the more likely they are to stay committed to your organization. And depending on the level and the skill set of the employee, there are kind of different levels according to a ladder of empowerment. So could be that, you know, there's a problem and you ask somebody to just go get the data, go find out what's going on and give it back to me, right? So that's kind of the first basic level. Second level is kind of like, okay, you've got some data, and give me some ideas for what we can do about it, right? So they kind of recommend some actions as well. The third level is, well, okay, I've got the data and I'm going to tell you what I would like to do with this, right? So the employee is a little bit more involved in the process. So not only are they collecting the data or figuring out the information about the problem, they're also then reporting back that what they plan to do about it, right? The third one, again, the employee takes a little bit more action. So they're getting all the information, they're taking action, and then they're telling us what they did about it. And then the last one is they just go ahead and do it, right? So they're completely autonomous, completely on their own. And again, that kind of engenders trust as well. So kind of a moment here, if you want to take a minute to ask questions or think about, you know, your own setting, and is there anything that you can do to sort of empower your team a little bit more? Is there anything you can delegate? Is there anything that they're able to do probably that they're not currently doing? Questions so far? Comments? All right. All right, another piece of teamwork, again, is around diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So this kind of circles back to what we talked about at the very beginning of the hour around a sense of belonging, right? So does everyone feel like they belong? So it's not just, I have people on board that have a different demographic, but do they also feel part of the team, right? And if you want to dig a little bit deeper into what belonging means, it's like the 4 bullets I have on the slide here, seen for our, we're seen for our unique contributions. And I also feel connected to my coworkers, right? So I feel I have a voice. I feel like I'm connected. I also am supported in what I want to do with respect to my own development. And I really feel committed to my organization, right? I'm very proud of what we stand for and what we do. And those are kind of all the things that go into a sense of belonging. Okay, so if you think about that for a minute, so how does your own culture or how does your own setting set up? Okay, do you really have a space that everyone feels safe to be who they really are, right? Can they really be their authentic selves? And I've had some interesting conversations with my MBA students about this. And several of them shared issues with, I just really can't be who I really am at work, right? I'm feeling conflicted about what is accepted and what isn't. And that's kind of a real something to think about, right? So we might think people feel okay, but really, how do you really know about that? So, kind of working with your organization, working with your team and finding out, do they really feel like they're part of the team or not is really crucial to moving forward. And then what do I do to promote inclusivity, right? First of all, kind of self-awareness is key. So am I aware of my own implicit bias? And am I open to learning and understanding that I don't know everything? Sometimes as managers, we think we have to know everything, but just being humble and saying, wow, I have like no idea and I really need to learn more about this. And if something looks, if you get a sense that maybe there is some inequity or exclusion going on, do you intervene when it's appropriate? So not just passively worrying about this, but actually actively promoting inclusion as well. And how do I support and promote my marginalized members or those members who may feel like they're marginalized, right? And then how do we manage differences? There's a lot of great training out there as well. We could do a whole seminar just on this topic as well. But again, it also comes to opening your mind and fostering a learning mindset within your group, right? Making it okay to ask questions and learn about others. And then I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the talk around hidden bias, right? So are we making sure that we're really considering everyone from every background when we do our selection in the first place? All right, and this is kind of just the other group dynamic social stuff that goes around with teamwork, right? So providing opportunities for everyone to get to know each other. So more social versus work related, right? Can people experience other positions? Can we do something around job rotation or cross training, right? So that people kind of understand what each position is about. Training is always good, big proponent of training, right? So opportunities for people to learn more about teamwork and communication and conflict resolution are keys. Kind of the next thing is non-social, but it's a really great way. And I'm a real strong proponent in building teams based on getting groups together to work on real issues, right? So having sort of an interdisciplinary or cross-departmental collaboration where people can get together outside of their normal groups and work on a certain problem, right? It could even be a community outreach project, right? Taking on something in the community and then working together to impact some real change. Taking a look at new ways to do things, right? Looking at what might be a whole platform of professional development for your team as well. Perhaps you could have a group work on that. Or even one of the things in my previous career, we had an issue with morale. And so what the leadership did is put together an employee team to work on just recognition and celebration of events, right? So it wasn't that the management had to come up with all these ideas. It was, again, something that was delegated to the employees. It was like, how to make this a better place and what can we do to encourage recognition and celebration, right? Also, if you want to promote teamwork, make sure you're recognizing and encouraging teamwork and supportive behavior in others, and be a positive role model about that as well too. build in some recognition for outcomes related to teamwork and collaboration, and really call people out when they've done a really great job of helping each other or getting through some crisis with work or customer or, you know, what have you, and making it fun, right? People are wanting fun these days a lot more than maybe in the past. All right, we're kind of reaching the top of our pyramid here. So what can we do to encourage our people to develop professionally, right? So you have to have some sort of process in place to address this, right? So if you have like a process, it's a little easier to make it happen every year. Key conversations that you can have around, you know, what talents do you have that you're not using? What would you like to take on, which might be a new opportunity for you to grow in your current position? Where would you like increased responsibility? And, you know, the kind of the famous question at the end, what would you like to be doing in the next 3 to 5 years? And helping people move along that path. Sometimes that means that they may move on to a different department, but again, we're keeping them within the organization. So to me, that's still a win. Okay, and again, these are some ideas for what we can do to expand someone's job or ways that we can provide some growth opportunities. Serving on committees, serving as a mentor, which is interesting if you've got a little bit more experience, allowing that person to kind of take over the training for the new hires is kind of a great way to do that. Again, there's a lot of opportunities here. And again, it's going to kind of depend on your organization and where you see those growth opportunities. So again, a moment for reflection, ideas. We can stop here if you have any ideas of what you do at your place or would like to hear more about. I'll take a minute. Keep moving. Okay. All right. This is interesting. So it's not just about what you're doing proactively, but just kind of be aware of changes in behavior in some of your employees. Sometimes people are pretty good at letting you know they're unhappy and they're probably looking elsewhere, right? So all of a sudden, maybe they're calling off a little more, they're not coming into work, they're taking longer lunches, they're doing only enough work to get by. All of a sudden, people are talking about how tired they are, how burned out they are, how much better it would be to work somewhere else. Talking about how happy people who have left are once they left, which I think is interesting. Again, just sort of withdrawing from the team or the group. And then this next term is just bubbled up in the recent past, and it's called quiet quitting. And it's sort of made went viral on social media. And basically that's somebody, it's kind of like bullet number 2, doing only enough work to get by, right? So I'm doing my job, but I'm not going to do anything more. Don't ask me to do more. I'll fly under the radar and I'll essentially be completely disengaged, but just doing enough to get by. So I think that's kind of an interesting concept, and we're seeing a lot more of that. Just to kind of go back to the engagement data, this quiet quitting is kind of a sign that people are really disengaged, right? And this number is growing. If you look at some of the Gallup results again, this is really hitting the employee group that's less than 35. They're just not engaging as much as maybe some of the other demographics are. So we really need to be mindful of people in this group. All right, and again, so what can we do about it? Just periodic check-ins with people, right? What makes you want to come to work here every day, and what will keep you here? And again, this could be part of the performance review process, but really needs to happen sort of on a real-time basis, right? Just checking in with people. One of the items of research shows that you should be doing this every week. I'm like, I don't know how many of us could do that every week. That seems a little unrealistic to me, but really periodically, more than once a year for sure. Maybe every couple of weeks would be great to just check in and see how they're doing. Any ideas, what we're working on, sharing information probably should be happening more rather than less. This is kind of another interesting piece, and this kind of goes back to some of the organizational behavior literature around what do I do on a daily basis, right? What are the nature, sort of the elements of my job? And really, the more that we can kind of look at how that job is structured, that may help employee engagement, right? And making them have a more of a sense of commitment to the organization. So if you take a look at each one of those bullets, skill varieties around how many different things can I do in one day, or is it like very super routine, which again will be really hard to get somebody engaged if they're doing just something super monotonous and routine every single day, right? Can we provide some variety in there? How much can I see sort of the fruits of my work, right? So am I just doing a little piece, or can I follow a task from the start to the finish? Also then, how does my job make an impact, right? This is kind of that purpose piece. So how does my job help us either impact the community, fulfill our mission, do good work? And this is taking on more and more interest, particularly by the younger generation of workers. So how am I making a difference on the job versus just coming in and doing something super repetitive and then going home? Autonomy is the next one. How much do I have a say over what I can do? And is it completely structured and I have to follow a very rigid protocol, or do I have the freedom or flexibility to be able to sort of structure my day the way I want? And then also, how much feedback do I get back? It's very difficult to continue being engaged when you don't know how you're doing. So getting data related to how you're doing, what your output looks like, either collectively or individually, will help people stay engaged and even try to improve, right? Once you have data, it's kind of like the Fitbit thing. Once you see it, once you see the data, you sort of get motivated, hopefully, to do a little better next time. All right, so again, so what does that look like in reality? What can we do to maybe redesign our jobs a little bit? So there's taking a look at the 5 criteria I just talked about and kind of deploying these questions or answering these questions might be a way to make your workplace a little more engaging for employees. So again, I'll stop here for a minute if you have any questions or ideas. Maybe you have done some of this in certain ways and would love to share. We'd love to hear from you. All righty, recognition is key. So the first place is just being around to see what people are doing, right? It's always great to have an immediate thank you versus something that you wait on, and it sort of loses its impact if you wait too long from the time you thank the employee or recognize that employee. So can you do it? Can you kind of walk around and see how everyone's doing, or again, just be more approachable? Most of the recognition should come from the manager, but a good portion, 30% of the time, it could just come from their own colleagues. So do you have a culture where people will recognize each other or say thank you to each other or help each other out when maybe you've had a particularly rough period? And then 20% is a little bit more larger from the organization. But again, the real impact comes from like the immediacy of it, directly related to something in real time. And think about, again, how am I doing that? Am I able to give recognition to people for certain things, or even the whole team? If it's been like a really tough time, a tough week, or heck, a whole couple of years that we've had here have been pretty tough. So what have we done to really appreciate the people that have gone over and above during this really tough time? And then what always thinking about what can I do differently to make that happen. Another thing, and I've seen this at a couple of different places, so share accomplishments of your employees, right? And you can do that in a variety of different ways based on your setting. Maybe people have done some really interesting work outside of the organization as well too. If you've gotten any feedback from your customers or clients or patients, it'd be a great idea to share that. Praise is done in public, and criticism is usually done in private. So the more that you can do publicly, I think the better. And then that also sends the message that this is what we're looking for. So it sends a message to other people that, you know what, when you do a good thing, this is kind of the model that we would like to see. Interestingly enough, a couple of years ago, we had an MBA team work with a chain of fast food restaurants, which shall remain nameless, in a county, a Northwest Indiana county. And there were several different restaurants that this owner owned, and the turnover and the performance in those were vastly different. So I led an MBA team to go in and look at what the differences were between those different establishments. So they kind of went in as secret shoppers first to kind of see what was going on in those organizations, and then later had meetings with the managers and kind of looked around at what else was going on in kind of the back of the house thing. The interesting thing, the restaurant that did outstanding, like super low turnover, employees were super engaged and committed. The manager had been there quite some time, but they also did this really well. They had a whole area in the back that shared, so going back to sharing information, it had information about their productivity with respect to what they were selling, what they weren't selling, issues, training opportunities. There was a whole section for recognizing employees. And this restaurant was far and above better than the other ones. And the other ones had like nothing. So it's like case in point, this really happened. And it was a real eye opener for my students. They're like, oh my gosh, this stuff really works. And yeah, it really does. So it does pay off in the long run.
Cindy,
All
we have a
right.
comment from Stephanie.
Okay.
I can read it. She says, I can't put anything in the chat for some reason. So chat is disabled. We need to use Q&A.
Okay.
She says, I think the younger generation is more how based and wants to understand versus just do it of older generations. From my experience, understanding how I fit in into the organization as a whole really helps me understand how my cog in the wheel moves the rest of the machine. Understanding that difference between generations will help connect with the staff.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, that's right. So it's, again, am I connected to a bigger purpose? And what does this really mean? So I love that you shared that. Thank you so much for that. That's absolutely 100% spot on. So awesome. Anything else on that? Again, kind of what's the bigger picture in mind? So I think this is one of my last slides here too. So we're wrapping up soon, but take a look at some of the elements of effective recognition programs, right? So number one, make sure you're doing it and take time to celebrate, but you can also then tie it to organizational goals as well, right? So it could be related to results. So something related to sales or profits or some sort of productivity or some quality initiative, but also then on sort of more cultural components or relational components, right? So customer service or teamwork or collaboration or going over and above to help a colleague when they were really struggling. So it could be along any of those things. Again, it's gonna sort of tie into your mission and your departmental culture and values, but make sure that people kind of understand what's important. Fairness and equity are again kind of interesting components to consider as well. Keep it simple. The second to last bullet: be careful of friendly competition. I have heard stories from some of my students over time that the friendly competition really became ruthless and brutal. So sometimes you have hyper competitive people, and they may have, gotten the most sales, but they've pretty much destroyed all camaraderie in the department this is sort of one of the aftermaths of that. So you have to be real careful about that. And it really does depend on different individual settings, who are the members of your team, what's important to them. And then again, how does that relate to your organization?
Cindy?
Yeah.
Donna would like to know if you have any information on the impact on businesses of quiet quitting.
Oh, hey, Donna. Yes. Yeah, it's out there. A good place to look are either the Gallup organization or else Gartner. Actually, there's three: Gallup, Gartner, and McKinsey. If you'd like, I can send you some research on that. But really, all you have to do is put in, you do a Google search and talk about, just say quiet quitting, and those three kind of pop up, and we'll give you some business impact of that. Because that really is kind of it's so there's kind of three levels of engagement according to Gallup, right? There's the highly engaged, and those are the people you want that are like all in 100%, doing great things, making, innovative improvements. Then there's sort of the disengaged, and then there's the actively disengaged. And the disengaged and the actively disengaged are growing as a percentage. And that quiet quitting is kind of that middle one, where I'm not like actively doing things, to sabotage the organization, but I am not giving in. I'm not going to do anything more than I need to do. And again, that really tanks productivity and also morale as well. So I could share with you offline if you'd like, but it's super easy to find. It's kind of all out there. And those are kind of really three good reputable sites. So anything from Gallup, anything from Gartner or McKinsey, they're kind of the leaders when it comes to employee engagement and workforce development and management development, those kind of things. So thanks for the question.